Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anushe Khan, and I'm joined by my colleague Jennifer Kim, and we are both policy and project officers on the Health and Ageing team at the Federation of Ethnic Communities Councils of Australia, or FECCA for short. Today, we're hoping to talk to you all about what makes effective engagement with called older people and communities, using some of the learnings from the Encompass Multicultural Aged Care Connector program. Before we begin today, we would like to acknowledge and pay our respects to the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people as the traditional owners of the lands on which FECCA is located and where our team is joining you from today. We celebrate and acknowledge their connections to land, sea and community and pay our deepest respects to elders past and present. I'd also like to extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who may be attending this session today. So a bit of an overview on our presentation. We will give you a bit of background on who FECCA is, introduce the program, and then move through some of the core learnings for today around what constitutes effective engagement with older people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, their families and their communities as well. We'll be doing this using learnings from the Encompass program and some of the best practice developed on the ground through our bilingual and bicultural workforce. We'll then wrap this session up with where to from here and go through some of the ways that you can stay engaged with this work after today's session. So FECCA is the national peak body representing the voice, views, needs of culturally and linguistically diverse communities in Australia. We are a member-based organisation made up of peak representative bodies in each state and territory across the country. And we primarily do policy and advocacy work across a range of different policy areas, critically providing federal government with policy recommendations and insights into the experiences of called communities and the impacts of that policy making and decision making on the communities. The Encompass Multicultural Aged Care Connector program is a national navigational support, aged care navigational support program, I should say, for older people, carers, family members from core backgrounds. It is a partnership between FECCA and 23 multicultural ethno-specific organisations and is funded by the Commonwealth Department of Health and Aged Care. And we operate across 29 sites across metro and regional locations. Critical to the program is two kind of core components. The first being one-on-one intensive, more case management work that is delivered through dedicated bilingual and bicultural workers. Each site hosts one worker who we call an Encompass connector. And the second core component is really community level capacity building and engagement of the community that surrounds the older person. To do this, we are informed by our program framework, which puts the older person at the centre of everything. It is rooted in the understanding that there is an ecosystem that surrounds that older person. And the aim of this program is to really build the knowledge and the capabilities of this ecosystem, understand the different components that influence the experience of that older person when navigating systems, particularly aged care for the purposes of this program. And acknowledging that that ecosystem really critically involves trusted community touch points, the role that they play. So these are business owners, faith leaders, community leaders, also acknowledging carers and family members and the role that family and intergenerational approaches to care and decision making have on older people from core backgrounds. And this framework is really informed by the aged care quality standards, particularly Standard 1, which looks at consumer dignity and choice. and is further then informed by the aged care diversity framework that sets out the rights of people from diverse backgrounds to make informed choices about their access to safe, equitable and quality aged care. So as I've kind of alluded to, core to this program is a person-centred approach and also an ecosystems approach. So not only placing the person at the centre of the ecosystem, but ensuring that that ecosystem is leveraged to create a greater impact and support for the person that sits at the centre of it. Now, I'll pass over to my colleague Jen to look at how do we actually achieve this in practical terms.
Yeah, thanks, Anushe. So the question comes down to how do we best apply this framework into practice? So when the FECCA team was designing and implementing this program on the ground, there were two things that really had to be a foundational ground. And that first one is to capacity build and train the workforce. And there were two reasons behind this. First of all, to equip them to understand this framework and have the elements of knowledge and skills in order to put it into practice. But second, to acknowledge that even there is diversity within the workforce coming from various backgrounds and experiences. So really to ensure that common knowledge and the understanding and the skills will be available and be consistent throughout all sites and delivery of this program. So as you can see that there is an understanding on the aged care sector and how that sort of aging and the aged care process influenced by culture and intersectional diversities, which includes cultural competency. But also there are elements, strong elements about co-design. So we're really working with the individual and the community, putting them at the center. But really build that sort of person-centered, community-driven approach to using that approach and building the community assets that's currently available, but leveraging on that to further develop the community and their capacities. So the second element to how is that we have used these four main vessels to deliver the program and allow our workforce to engage effectively with the community. So as mentioned earlier, that one-on-one navigational and case management program is key element to the engagement activities. So really meeting with the older person, their carers and touch points on the ground, but predominantly with the community level engagement. So we have really encouraged our connectors, our workforce to start delivering co-design workshops early in the piece, where you get to really not only build that early engagement and the relationship, but also understand the aged care needs of the individual, but also mainly how they like to be engaged and what was the messaging they'd like to hear in whatever shape or form they prefer. And based on these co-design activities, that would sort of fit into information sessions delivered around this program, but also aged care in general, but town halls, which covers some of the topics and the knowledge that the connectors, not only the connectors, sorry, the community and the older persons are wanting to hear based on those co-design activities.
So when it comes to what has worked in this process and how we achieved some of those activities that Jen just has outlined, really it's about the human resources and leveraging of those existing assets within the community. The first asset being the bilingual and bicultural workforce that this program is implemented and delivered through, and really the strength of our Encompass connectors in being able to use their language skills, use their cultural understandings, their linkages within their local communities that have existed sometimes for decades. So there is a real trust that has already been built there between the workers and their communities. But where we've also seen there may not be an existing relationship, the connector is then able to use that shared experience, that shared understanding, and build those relationships, the trust, the rapport required in a much more efficient way and in a much more appreciated way by the community. They're also able to use this to inform their one-on-one support as well in supporting older people and families and carers through the aged care system. Once a relationship has been built, they're able to continue using that cultural bridging skill to support them through the system. Then it's about the touch points as a support asset to the workforce, and really utilising, again, the existing relationships of our agents of trust that are in the community, acknowledging and respecting their roles within the community as trusted leaders, as people who others go to for support and advice. Also acknowledging the kind of collectivist community cultures that exist within the CALD community. You know, people go to each other for advice on really critical decisions in their life. It could be a faith leader that they go to. So really ensuring that there is a role in resourcing for touch points to amplify the work of the connectors, to go and build and strengthen those networks that are building in the community. So from here, we then understand through those human resources what works then when it comes to material development and material resourcing. So the first thing that we learned was co-design and in-language materials are one of the most effective ways to disseminate and build understanding around the aged care system. And really, as Jen highlighted earlier, the co-design process of involving people who you are wanting to reach and wanting to engage with from the beginnings, involving them in that planning and designing process of the messaging, gaining a really good understanding of what platforms do people go to, what is going to be most useful for them to receive those messages. And we saw that for some communities, social media worked really well. Social media platforms like WeChat, WhatsApp, they were the go-to trusted platforms. For other communities, really it was localized ethnic radio and newspaper that was the most listened to or the most trusted source. So it's all about being responsive to the needs of that specific community, listening to what the trusted influencers, the touch points are saying, and constantly evolving that and making sure that it is culturally tailored and appropriate to that community.
Thanks, Anushe. And so you may be thinking that sounds like a very encompassed program-specific strategies, but it really comes down to these 5 critical components for everyone sitting here today. And that is, again, that one size does not fit all. That goes back to this person-centered approach, really focusing on what the individual wants and the community want, but leveraging on that sort of trust and rapport that requires for you to understand that and working with the individual and the community from CALD backgrounds. Thus, again, just try to build and leverage on the community capacity together, understanding the ecosystem that's surrounded by the individual. I won't go too much in detail, but I think we've spoken enough about the importance of bilingual and bicultural workforce as a key vessel to deliver and engage with the individuals on the ground because of the skills and the knowledge and the trust and relationships they have. And again, that co-design and in-language materials that are very effective trying to get the message across. What are some of the other learnings? Again, this is nothing new and under the sun, and I'm sure all of you, many of you resemble with this, that there are cultural barriers and systematic barriers to aged care. So aging in general, but also trying to engage with the aged care system and other support services. So programs like this have been really effective to identify and further break down to what those barriers are, but how do you best address that? We also learned that there is a limitation of this one specific program working on the ground, we need to really build the systems around the older person, again, with the community and various systems across aged care that the older person get in contact with. Creative strategies to engage with the CALD communities have been really effective, again, to share some of the experience that Anushe shared earlier. So where to from here? CareFinder is rolling out from January 23 next year as our program ends in June. So our program will focus mainly on the transition of this process, and we'll continue to engage and provide that advocacy to the Department of Health and Aged Care and various stakeholders to really talk about the needs and experiences through that. For you, you can continue to engage with FECCA's work and feel free to contact us on these details, but also keep an eye on some of the work that we are continuing to do. So thank you so much for listening to this presentation, and we look forward to answering some of your questions.